The morning sun hadn't yet reached full strength when Maya Johnson stepped out of her small apartment on the east side of Atlanta, holding her 8-month-old son, Caleb, in her arms. The day was bright, but something about the air felt uneasy, like a warning whispered through the wind. She had done this walk 1,000 times before, past the cracked sidewalks, the smell of the corner bakery, and the hum of buses groaning their way down Peachtree Street. Her job at the downtown law firm didn't pay much, but it was steady. She worked hard, smiled politely, and always arrived on time. Today was no different, or so she thought. Caleb squirmed, giggling, reaching for the sunlight that danced through the trees. Maya smiled. "Are you hungry again, little man?" she whispered, balancing his tiny bottle in one hand while adjusting her purse with the other. She was running late, but she wasn't worried. The bank building was just across the street from her office. She planned to stop there for 5 minutes to cash her paycheck. The Jefferson Bank Tower stood tall, glass shining, guarded by men in Navy uniforms. Security was always tight, but Maya never paid much attention to it. People like her, working, tired, invisible, rarely caught their eye. But today, something was different. Inside the lobby, a strange tension floated in the air. The security officers were whispering into radios, eyes darting between people entering. Maya noticed it immediately. She slowed her step, clutching Caleb closer. One of the guards, a tall man with a square jaw and mirrored sunglasses, watched her approach. He didn't smile. "Are you here for business?" he asked curtly, hand resting near his holster. Maya blinked. "Yes, sir. I just need to cash my check. I've got my ID." The guard gave a small nod, but his eyes didn't soften. He stepped aside slightly, watching her every move. She walked toward the teller line, feeling eyes burning into her back. A mother with a baby shouldn't have to feel like a threat. But in that moment, she did. As she waited, she overheard fragments of conversation on the guards' radios. "Suspicious woman, possible threat." Her heart skipped. "They can't be talking about me." Maya shifted Caleb to her other arm, glancing around. People were watching, subtle but sharp. The teller, a young white woman, smiled nervously as Maya approached the counter. "Hi," Maya said softly. "I just need to cash this." She slid the check under the glass. The teller's hands trembled slightly. She glanced toward security, who were now murmuring in low tones. Maya's pulse quickened. "Is there a problem?" she asked. The teller didn't answer. She just nodded stiffly and pressed a small button under the counter. Maya didn't know it, but that button wasn't for a malfunctioning computer or a cash request. It was a panic alarm. The guard stiffened. One of them began moving closer. Maya's voice wavered. What's going on?" The teller whispered, "Just please stay calm." But calm was already gone. One of the guards approached, fast, hand near his weapon. "I'm going to need you to put your bag down." "What? Why?" Maya asked, stepping back instinctively. Caleb whimpered, sensing her fear. "I'm just cashing a check. What's happening?" "Put it down." The guard's voice was sharp, echoing across the marble floor. Heads turned. Phones came out. Someone started recording. Maya froze. Her mind raced. If I move too fast, they'll think I'm resisting. If I don't move, they'll think I'm hiding something. She slowly lowered her bag, hands trembling. Caleb began to cry. "Please," Maya whispered. "He's just a baby." The guard's finger twitched near his holster. The other one radioed something, urgent, low, clipped. Then came the sound that no one forgot. Bang! A single gunshot cracked through the lobby. Maya screamed as glass shattered beside her. She hit the floor, curling her body around her baby. Caleb's cries filled the air, louder than the chaos that erupted. People screamed. Someone yelled, "She's got a baby." Others ran for the exits. The teller dived behind the counter. Maya's heart pounded. Did they shoot at me? She looked down. Caleb was crying but unhurt. Her shoulder stung. A shard of glass had sliced through her sleeve. The guard who fired looked stunned. I thought. But before he could finish, the bank doors slammed open. A man in a gray suit shouted, "What the hell just happened here?" He was the branch manager. He ran toward the guards, fury on his face. You fired inside the lobby? Are you insane? The security officer stammered. She reached into her bag. For a diaper. Maya gasped through tears, her voice cracking. I was pulling out a diaper for my baby. The lobby was chaos. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The guard's hand shook as he looked at what he'd done, or almost done. Maya pressed her forehead to her baby's, whispering over and over, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy's here." Then came the second wave of sirens. Outside, black SUVs screeched to a halt. Men in dark jackets rushed toward the entrance, shouting orders. FBI, move. Everyone stepped back. The bank manager froze. FBI? What the hell? Within seconds, the building was surrounded. Federal agents stormed inside, weapons raised, sweeping the lobby. Drop your weapons. One agent barked at the security officers. The guards stood frozen, confused and terrified. Maya could barely process what was happening. She held Caleb tight as agents spread through the room, shouting, "Nobody moves. Hands where we can see them." Her mind raced. The FBI? For what? An agent spotted her on the ground, clutching her baby. "Are you okay?" He called, lowering his weapon slightly. Maya's voice trembled. "He fired at me. I didn't do anything." The agent's expression shifted from confusion to realization to anger. He turned sharply toward the guards. "Who fired?" The guard who pulled the trigger raised a shaking hand. I thought she was." "Thought she was what?" The agent snapped. "A threat? She's a mother holding a baby." Another agent pulled up the security feed from the counter monitors. The footage played, Maya walking in, smiling softly at the teller, holding her baby close. Nothing threatening. No sudden moves. The silence in the room was crushing. The FBI team leader clenched his jaw. He said gently, "We need to get you checked by paramedics, okay?" But Maya couldn't move. Her body was frozen between shock and disbelief. "I just came to cash a check," she whispered. "Why did they think I was dangerous?" The words hung in the air like smoke. An older black FBI agent stepped forward slowly, his face heavy with empathy. "Because they don't see the same thing we do," he said quietly. "They see threat before they see life." He reached out his hand to help her up, but she hesitated. For a long second, she stared at the floor, at the shattered glass, the gun casing, and the spilt baby bottle. Then she took his hand. As the paramedics moved in, the agents escorted the shaken guards aside. The manager watched in stunned silence, realizing that the world was about to know what happened inside his bank that morning. Outside, cameras were already gathering. The sound of sirens had drawn a crowd. People began whispering. They shot at a mother with a baby. Maya stepped outside, Caleb in her arms, tears streaking her face. The sunlight that once felt warm now burnt against her skin. A reporter called out, "Can you tell us what happened inside?" She didn't answer. She just looked at the building, the glass, the flags, the people staring, and whispered, barely audible, "You almost took my child's life, for nothing." As the agents guided her toward the ambulance, the FBI team leader turned to his squad. "Secure everything," he ordered. "Nobody leaves until every second of this is on record." Inside, the guard who fired sat slumped in a chair, head in his hands, muttering, "I thought I was doing my job." But everyone knew that wasn't his job. His job was to protect. And today, he had become the danger. Outside, the city carried on, horns blaring, people rushing to work, unaware that a single gunshot inside a downtown bank had just lit a fire that would soon reach far beyond Atlanta. Because sometimes, one woman's pain becomes a nation's awakening. And this was just the beginning. The flashing red and blue lights outside the Jefferson Bank Tower painted the morning sky in broken color. Sirens faded to a dull hum as the last patrol cars sealed the perimeter. The FBI had taken over, their black jackets moving in practice rhythm, taping off the lobby, marking bullet fragments, collecting witness statements. Maya sat in the back of an ambulance, her baby swaddled in a foil blanket. Caleb's cries had softened into hiccups, his small hands clutching her shirt. The paramedic gently cleaned a shallow cut on her shoulder. "You're lucky," he he said quietly. If that bullet had gone 2 inches left. Please don't, Maya whispered. I don't want to think about that. Her voice broke. She hadn't yet cried fully, only trembling, numb breath that came and went like the tide. Her body shook, not from pain but from a memory of the sound, that single, deafening bang that changed everything. An FBI agent approached. It was the same man who had helped her up earlier, Agent Carter, tall, calm, his brown skin glinting faintly under the flashing lights. His face carried the kind of weight only experience could shape, the look of someone who had seen injustice too many times to count. Maya, he said softly, crouching to meet her eyes, we need to ask you a few questions. Not long, I promise. I just want to understand exactly what happened inside. She nodded, gripping her son tighter. I went in to cash my check, she began, her voice steady but fragile. I said hello to the teller. Then I noticed the guard whispering. One of them started watching me like I was dangerous. I tried to ignore it, but then the teller pressed something under her counter. I thought maybe she was calling for a manager. Her throat tightened. Next thing I knew, one of them was shouting at me to put down my bag. I did, slowly. But Caleb started crying, and I tried to calm him. Then the gun went off. Agent Carter nodded slowly. Did you say or do anything that might have made him think you were a threat? Maya looked at him, eyes widening in disbelief. I was holding my baby. He nodded again, grimly. That's what I thought. From behind them, another voice interrupted, sharper, impatient. Carter, we need you inside. It was Agent Russo, his white partner, pacing near the entrance. His tone carried that clipped professionalism that often hid irritation. Carter stood but looked back at Maya. We're going to make sure this gets investigated properly, okay? Don't let anyone pressure you to stay quiet. Maya's lip trembled. I don't want to be on the news. I just want my baby safe. Carter's eyes softened. You did nothing wrong. Remember that. Inside the bank, chaos had turned into cold procedure. Evidence markers dotted the floor. A single bullet hole scarred the marble wall near the teller counter. The shooter, Officer Blake Stanton, 38, a former state trooper, sat in an isolated conference room. His hands were clasped together, knuckles white. Sweat clung to his temples. Across from him, Agent Russo clicked his pen. You discharged your weapon inside a crowded bank. Explain. Blake's jaw flexed. She looked nervous, kept glancing around, clutching that bag like she was hiding something. So, your instinct was to fire at a mother holding an infant. Russo shot back. Blake looked down. She reached into her bag fast. I reacted. Agent Carter stepped in, arms crossed. And what did you think she was pulling out? A weapon? A bomb? Or maybe a bottle for her baby? Blake's voice dropped. You weren't there. Carter leaned forward. No, but I've been in enough rooms like this to know exactly what was there. Fear. The kind that comes when a black woman doesn't look scared enough for your comfort. Russo glanced at him, surprised by the bluntness, but he didn't interrupt. Blake swallowed hard. You're twisting this. No, Carter said. You made a choice. And now a mother's life is never going to be the same. By noon, the story was already spreading online. A passerby's cell phone video, only 30 seconds long, showed the moment after the shot. Maya was crying, clutching a baby, while a guard stood frozen with his gun drawn. The caption read, They fired at a black mom in a bank, with her baby in her arms. Within hours, it had 3 million views. Outrage poured across social media. How is this still happening? She was holding a baby. Are you kidding me? This is why we say protect black women. By evening, news vans lined the streets. Maya sat quietly in her apartment, blinds drawn. The FBI had taken her statement. The police had released her, and the paramedics had cleared her injuries. But the silence of her home felt heavier than the noise outside. Every creak of the floor and every car horn outside made her flinch. Caleb slept in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Maya watched him for a long time, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. A knock broke the stillness. Maya. Agent Carter's voice came softly from behind the door. It's me. She hesitated before opening it. He held 2 paper cups. Chamomile tea. My mom swore it fixes everything. Despite herself, Maya smiled faintly. Your mom sounds smart. She was, Carter said. She also taught me that silence can be a prison if you stay in it too long. Maya sighed. Everyone keeps saying I should talk to the press. But what's the point? They'll twist my words. People will move on in a week. Maybe, Carter said, but maybe they won't. Sometimes one story, the right story, breaks a pattern. Maya looked away. I didn't ask to be a story. I know, he said gently, but you are one now. The question is, who gets to tell it? Across town, in the FBI field office, Russo was reviewing footage again. Over and over. The same 30 seconds, slowed down to fractions a second. There, he said, pausing, right before he fires. She's not reaching into bag fast. She's holding her baby with both hands. Carter nodded grimly. Exactly, which means he fired on instinct, not evidence. Russo frowned. This is going to be bad for the bank. Real bad. It should be, Carter replied. The next morning, headlines covered every paper and screen. FBI investigates bank shooting of unarmed black mother. Security guard suspended after gunfire inside lobby. Eyewitness says guard aimed without warning. Protesters gathered outside the bank. Signs read justice for Maya and her skin is not a threat. Maya watched the coverage from her couch, numb. The doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't Carter. It was a woman in a gray blazer with a calm, commanding voice. Mrs. Johnson? My name is Angela Porter. I'm a civil rights attorney. I represent families who've gone through what you have. Maya hesitated. I don't have money for a lawyer. Angela smiled gently. Good thing justice doesn't always wait for money. By that afternoon, the FBI held a press briefing. Cameras flashed as Agent Carter stood beside the podium, his expression stoic. He began, the investigation into the Jefferson Bank shooting is ongoing. At this stage, evidence indicates that the use of force was unjustified. The subject, Ms. Maya Johnson, posed no threat and was in clear view holding an infant when the discharge occurred. The room erupted with questions. Agent Carter, will the guard be charged? Was racial bias a factor? Is the bank cooperating? Carter raised a hand. We will not speculate, but we will pursue accountability, no matter where it leads. In the crowd, Angela Porter watched silently. She knew how these stories went, how the headlines would fade, how the system would fight to protect itself. But something in this case felt different. The video was too clear. The emotion is too raw. Later that evening, Blake Stanton sat in his car, engine off, staring at the dashboard. His phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, his lawyer, old colleagues. He ignored them all. On the passenger seat lay his badge, the symbol of everything he thought he was: protector, authority, order. Now, it just looked like a lie. He gripped the wheel, whispering to himself, I didn't mean to. But intention doesn't erase impact. In her apartment, Maya finally opened her phone again. Thousands of messages flooded in, some supportive, some cruel. Stay strong, Queen. They could have killed you. Bet she made it up for clout. Where's the full video? She must have done something. She shut it off. The noise was too much. For a long moment, she just stared at her reflection in the window, tired, broken, but alive. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Baby, the world will always try to shrink you. Don't let them. She whispered softly, I won't. And that night, Maya wrote her first statement. Not for the police, not for the FBI, but for herself. My name is Maya Johnson. I went into that bank holding my son. I left holding fear. But fear isn't all I'll carry. They took my peace, but they won't take my voice. She didn't know it yet, but those words, quiet and trembling, would travel farther than any bullet ever could. Because when a black mother speaks her truth, the world has no choice but to listen. By sunrise, the city wasn't the same. What began as one frightened mother's nightmare had become a nationwide reckoning. News vans still crowded the Jefferson Bank, while thousands of voices filled the streets. They carried signs, candles, anger, and hope. Chants echoed against the steel and glass of the financial district. Justice for Maya. Justice for Maya. Her skin is not a weapon. The protest wasn't violent. It was alive, a current of pain turned into purpose. Inside a nearby office building, Agent Carter stood at a window, watching the crowd move like a tide. He turned as Agent Russo entered, holding a file. "They are trying to spin this," Russo said. Bank's PR team just released a statement claiming the guard acted in self-defense under perceived threat. Carter scoffed. Perceived threat? She was holding a baby. Russo exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know, but they're lawyering up, and the state's attorney's office is hesitating. There's pressure from the top." Pressure to do what? To make this go away quietly. Carter turned back to the window, jaw tightening. Quietly is how injustice survives. Maya woke that morning to the sound of her phone vibrating. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of unread messages. Angela Porter, her lawyer, was already waiting in the living room with a calm but determined expression. "You're trending on every platform," Angela said. "People are organizing marches and petitions. The footage has gone global." Maya blinked, still disoriented. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Angela said gently. "But that's how it works. One's truth escapes. It doesn't ask permission." Maya sat on the couch, Caleb sleeping against her chest. "They are saying I scared him, that he thought I had a gun. Do you think they'll believe me?" Angela looked her straight in the eye. "I don't care if they believe you. We have proof, and I've spent my life making people listen to proof." Meanwhile, the shooter, Blake Stanton, faced his own storm. He sat alone in a dim motel room, his face buried in his hands. The walls felt like they were closing in. His phone rang again. His wife. He didn't answer. He scrolled through social media instead. Every post, every headline painted him as a monster. "Bank guard shoots unarmed black mother." "How do you accidentally fire at a woman with a baby?" He slammed the phone down, pacing. "They don't know what it's like," he muttered to himself. "They don't know what it's like to be scared." But deep inside, a quieter voice whispered, "You weren't scared of danger. You were scared of her." 2 days later, the FBI's findings were ready. Carter walked into the press room, flanked by cameras and reporters. His tone was measured but firm. "Our analysis of the security footage confirms that the victim, Ms. Maya Johnson, was unarmed and posed no threat. The guard discharged his weapon without cause. The investigation has been turned over to the Department of Justice." A murmur ran through the room. "Agent Carter," one reporter called out, "is this being classified as a hate crime?" Carter paused. "We are examining all possible motivations, including racial bias." Another voice shouted, "How does it feel to be the only black agent leading this case?" He met their gaze, steady and sharp. "It feels like doing my job, which is to protect citizens, regardless of who they are." By that evening, the footage, the uncut version from the bank's cameras, was released. It showed Maya entering the bank calmly, smiling at the teller. The guard was watching her from across the room, hand resting on his weapon. Maya handing her check over, adjusting her baby's blanket. Then, the flash, the shot, the chaos. There was no reaching, no sudden movement. Just fear, but not from her. The internet erupted again. "This is murder, plain and simple." She never even flinched before he fired. "Charge him now." The story reached late-night TV, podcasts, and national panels. Some commentators tried to defend the guard, saying he reacted instinctively. Others called it systemic racism in uniform. And through it all, Maya stayed silent until she couldn't anymore. 3 nights later, she appeared on live television. Angela sat beside her, while a reporter adjusted as Maya looked nervous, her eyes darting between the lights and the camera lens. The host asked softly, "Maya, why did you decide to speak now?" She took a deep breath. "Because silence protects no one. I want people to see what fear looks like when it's pointed at us, when our skin makes people pull triggers before they think." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. I was holding my baby. That's all I was holding. And if they see that as dangerous, then no black mother is safe. The room went silent. The anchor's voice faltered before thanking her. Within hours, that clip was shared millions of times. Her word became a rallying cry, repeated on signs, quoted in speeches, and written across murals. I was holding my baby. That's all I was holding. The next morning, Agent Carter's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Politicians, media outlets, advocacy groups, all demanding updates. He turned off the phone and went for a walk. He ended up standing in front of a small park memorial, a statue of a woman holding a child, cast in bronze, eyes lifted toward the sky. A plaque at the base read, "For every mother who stood against fear." He thought of his own mother, how she used to walk him to school, gripping his hand tight whenever a patrol car drove by. "Keep your hands visible. Baby," she'd whisper. "Smile, even if it hurts." He closed his eyes. The same fear she carried decades ago was still alive, and it was still killing people. That afternoon, the FBI received a call from the Department of Justice. Agent Russo took it. "Yes, sir," he said. "Understood." He hung up and looked at Carter. DOJ stepping in. They're opening a federal civil rights case. The Attorney General wants full cooperation. Carter allowed himself a small nod. Good. Maybe now someone will finally be held accountable. At the same time, in the same city, Blake Stanton walked into a police precinct, head bowed. He placed his gun and badge on the counter. "I need to turn myself in," he said, "for what I did at Jefferson Bank." The officer behind the counter blinked in surprise. "We haven't received an arrest order yet." Blake's voice cracked. "You will." The protest grew larger, peaceful but powerful. Celebrities joined in. News anchors wept on live television. And at the center of it all was a single mother who had done nothing but try to cash a check. Maya found herself invited to speak at a rally downtown. Angela encouraged her, but Maya hesitated. "I'm not a speaker. I'm just tired." Angela smiled softly. "Then speak your tiredness. The world needs to hear it." So she did. Standing before a sea of faces, black, white, and brown, she took the microphone, her baby in her arms. "I didn't come here to fight," she began, "but the world gave me no choice." The crowd listened in silence. They called me a threat when I was just trying to live. They saw danger when all I had was love. But if being seen scares them, then I'll make sure they never look away again. Cheers erupted. Some people cried. Others simply stood, hands over their hearts. In that moment, Maya wasn't a victim anymore. She was a mirror, reflecting a nation's conscience. Later that night, as she returned home, Agent Carter met her on the steps. "Powerful speech," he said. She smiled faintly. "I just spoke the truth." He nodded. Truth is a way of echoing. Maya looked up at the stars. "Do you think it'll change anything?" Carter paused. "Change takes time. But courage, that changes people. And people change the world." Maya held Caleb closer, whispering, "Then I'll keep being brave. For him." Meanwhile, inside a dark conference room downtown, a group of men in suits argue quietly. "This case is bad for business," one banker said. "The bank's reputation is collapsing." Another replied coldly, "So we settle quietly, offer her money." But the first man shook his head. "Money won't fix this. People don't want cash. They want justice." The room fell silent, because even they knew justice was no longer optional. Back at home, Maya sat at her table, reading letters from strangers. Some were simple. "You gave me hope." "My daughter's your age. Thank you for surviving." Others came from mothers who'd lost children, from soldiers, from teachers, all saying the same thing. "We see you." Maya closed her eyes, letting the words wrap around her like a blanket. For the first time in weeks, she felt peace, fragile, but real. And somewhere, in the middle of that peace, a storm was still gathering. Because justice had been promised, but not yet delivered. The FBI's evidence was strong. The pressure was mounting. And as the case moved to court, everyone, Maya, Carter, Angela, the nation, braced for what would come next. Because stories like this didn't end easily. They burnt until something finally broke. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a place where words carried more weight than bullets, yet often failed to heal their wounds. Maya sat beside her lawyer, Angela Porter, holding Caleb close. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but she could feel the eyes of a nation on her. This was no longer just about her. It was about everyone who'd been dismissed, doubted, or destroyed for daring to exist in their own skin. Across the room sat Blake Stanton, the security guard. His face was pale, his uniform traded for a plain suit. He looked older now, hollowed by guilt and fear. The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a case about misunderstanding. This is a case about bias, lethal bias. He turned toward Blake. The defendant saw a young black mother, unarmed, holding her child. And in that moment, his fear outweighed her humanity. The defense attorney objected, but the judge, a stern black woman named Judge Evelyn Ross, overruled. "Proceed," she said firmly. Angela whispered to Maya, "She's fair. Don't worry." Maya nodded, fingers trembling on the edge of Caleb's blanket. The trial unfolded over 2 tense weeks. Witnesses came and went, bank employees, police officers, and experts on racial bias. Each testified that Maya had done nothing wrong. Then came the FBI evidence, the unedited footage, the audio from Blake's own body cam, and a report detailing inconsistencies in his statement. Agent Carter himself took the stand. "Agent Carter," the prosecutor began, "based on your investigation, did you find any indication that Ms. Johnson posed a threat?" Carter didn't hesitate. "None whatsoever." "And what did your analysis reveal about the guard's state of mind?" Carter leaned forward slightly. He admitted to instinctively reacting. But instinct isn't an excuse for prejudice. He saw a black woman and assumed danger. That assumption almost killed her and her child. The courtroom fell silent. When it was Maya's turn to testify, the world held its breath. She walked to the stand with quiet dignity. Her dress was simple, her voice steady, though her eyes shimmered with unspoken pain. The defense attorney tried to sound polite. "Ms. Johnson, would you say the guard looked frightened?" "Yes," Maya said softly. "Then perhaps he—" She interrupted, calm but powerful. "He was scared of a woman holding a baby. Scared of my skin. Scared of me breathing. If that's fear, then every one of us is in danger." The room erupted in whispers. The judge banged her gavel. But the point had been made, and it pierced through every wall in that building. On the final day, both sides presented their closing statements. The defense begged the jury to see Blake as a man who made a mistake in a tense moment. The prosecutor, however, stood tall, voice ringing with conviction. Mistakes don't come with a history of oppression behind them. Mistakes don't come wrapped in centuries of fear. He didn't make a mistake. He acted on a lie this country keeps teaching, that black life is dangerous by default. He turned toward the jury. "If we don't call this what it is, then we're telling the world it's okay to keep killing innocents in daylight." When the jury returned, the air was thick with tension. Maya sat perfectly still, her heart racing. Caleb, now awake, rested his tiny hand on her arm as if to steady her. The foreman stood, holding the verdict slip. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts, reckless endangerment, aggravated assault, and federal civil rights violation." Maya's breath caught. Angela squeezed her hand. Around them, muffled sobs and gasps filled the courtroom. Blake closed his eyes, whispering something only he could hear. Maybe a prayer, maybe regret. Judge Russ delivered the sentence, 15 years in federal prison. It wasn't enough to rewrite what happened, but it was enough to make history. Outside, a sea of supporters waited. When Maya stepped out, the crowd erupted in applause and tears. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Maya didn't speak immediately. She just stood there, letting the moment wash over her. Then, finally, she raised her voice, calm yet powerful. "Justice doesn't bring peace, but it brings accountability, and that's where healing begins." The crowd cheered, chanting her name. A month later, Maya returned to the same park where she used to feed the pigeons with Caleb. This time, the park had changed. A small bronze plaque had been installed on the bench. in honor of Maya Johnson for standing against fear and reminding the world that courage carries life. She sat down, smiling softly. Agent Carter joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "We did it. You, Angela, and everyone who believed I was more than a headline." He looked out over the park, where children played freely. "You know," he said, "people are already calling you a symbol." Maya smiled faintly. "Symbols fade, but stories, they live, and I want this one to mean something." "It already does," Carter said quietly. "You made them listen." In the following months, the story inspired reforms across the country. Security training programs began including bias recognition modules. Activists used Maya's case to push for federal legislation protecting civilians from racial profiling by private security. Even the Jefferson Bank issued an official apology and pledged millions toward community education and housing for single black mothers. Maya didn't attend their press conference. She didn't need to. She had moved forward, not in bitterness, but in strength. Late one evening, as rain pattered against the window, Maya sat at a desk writing in a small journal. She paused, looking at a photo taped to the wall, her holding baby Caleb on the day she left the hospital, both of them wrapped in the same blanket. Underneath it, she had written 3 words. "We survived truth." Caleb cooed from his crib, reaching out for her. She walked over, kissing his forehead. "Someday," she whispered, "you'll know why Mommy fought so hard. Not because I was angry, but because I love you enough to demand a world that's kinder." Months later, in Washington, D.C., a documentary premiered, The Woman with the Baby Blanket. The film chronicled Maya's story from that fateful day to the court's verdict. It ended with footage of her rally speech, her voice echoing over a montage of protests and marches around the nation. "I was holding my baby. That's all I was holding." When the credits rolled, the theater fell silent, and then applause thundered through the hall. Among those watching were senators, journalists, and students who would go on to join the fight for justice. Maya didn't attend the screening. Instead, she sat at home with her son, watching the news quietly, a faint smile crossing her face. For her, it wasn't about fame. It was about peace, and in that peace, her story had already done what it was meant to, awaken hearts that had been asleep for far too long. Weeks later, Carter visited her one last time before taking an assignment overseas. He handed her a small box. "From the Bureau," he said. Inside was a medal, the FBI Director's Civilian Courage Award. Maya laughed softly. "You didn't have to." "I didn't," he said, "but we wanted to. You reminded all of us what real bravery looks like." She looked up, eyes misty. "Bravery doesn't mean not being scared, Agent Carter. It means being scared and still showing up." He smiled. "You showed up for all of us." That night, after he left, Maya stood by the window, holding Caleb. The city light shimmered below, reflected in his wide, innocent eyes. "Look," she whispered, pointing upward. "See those stars? They're watching over us." Caleb giggled, reaching toward the glass. And for the first time since that terrible day at the bank, Maya truly smiled, not just with her lips, but with her soul. Because against all odds, she hadn't just survived. She had changed the world.